Life is made up of small choices: accepting a gift, opening a box, trusting a seemingly harmless gesture. But what if behind the ordinary appearance there was something that could not be undone? Today you will discover that sometimes the greatest threat is not what we see, but what silently watches us. Sometimes evil doesn't come with screams or violence. Sometimes he presents himself in a silent, discreet way, wrapped in a smile, hidden within something ordinary. And it is in this apparent normality that the real danger lies. Imagine being in the comfort of your home, surrounded by everything that is familiar to you. The smell of coffee that still hangs in the air, the soft morning light filtering through the curtains, the distant sound of the city waking up. Everything in perfect harmony. Until something new appears, a small box on his desk where nothing should be. A seemingly harmless object, perhaps a forgotten gift, an anonymous mime. Nothing that inspires immediate fear, just a flicker of curiosity. You get closer. Your fingers touch the rough paper of the wrapping. Feel the ribbon bow carefully tied, as if skilled hands had spent time molding each detail to feel special. And for a brief moment, your brain rationalizes. It must be something good. A gesture of affection, perhaps. An unexpected gift. But something inside you hesitates, an instinctive, primitive part that whispers that something is wrong. That normality is just a mask. That the danger lies in what you cannot see, in the hidden intention behind the perfect surface. You open the package, and what you find is not something that can be measured in value or usefulness. What you find is an invisible link that connects you to someone you don't know, someone who already knows you. Someone who sees no barriers, who doesn't respect limits, who has already invaded the only space that should be inviolable: your privacy. Suddenly that gift becomes a sentence, a reminder that you are not alone, that somewhere invisible eyes are focused on your every move, every sigh, every trivial decision that now seems heavy with meaning. You try to calm down. He tells himself it's paranoia, which is exaggeration. But then you notice details you previously ignored. The feeling of being watched, the slight discomfort as you walk through your own home, the almost imperceptible sound of something. Turning on, recording, transmitting. The gift was not a gift. It was an invitation to fear, an invitation to paranoia. And now, it's too late to refuse. What started as an innocent gesture turned into an invisible prison. Because true terror doesn't scream, he whispers. It does not advance with violence. It settles slowly like silent poison in the veins. You don't know who's watching. You don't know how long ago this started. And even worse, you don't know how far this person is willing to go. Because sometimes what feels like a gift is the silent signature of a predator that has already chosen you. And he's just getting started. Laura Santos was like so many other young women who wake up every day believing that the world, despite its flaws, is a safe place. She had a common routine, without any major surprises. He studied psychology at a prestigious university, but he was no different from most students. He lived between the rush of classes, the constant noise of notifications on his cell phone, rapid conversations on social media, and the silent desire to achieve his dreams. His day always started the same way. The alarm clock rang at 7. She reached out, still a little drowsy, to turn it off, stared at the ceiling for a few minutes, and then, overcoming her laziness, got up. The first thing I did was pick up my cell phone, check messages, scroll through the news feed, check the weather forecast. An automatic, almost unconscious routine. This was how another day began in the modern world, a world that felt safe behind the thin walls of his small studio in Block B of the university. Laura shared the apartment with her best friend, Camilla. The two had known each other since high school and had built a friendship based on confidences, late-night sessions, and a complicity that needed no words. The small studio was an organized mess. Books stacked on the table, mugs forgotten in the corners, classic movie posters decorating the walls. A simple space, but full of life. A home. After getting ready, Laura would grab a quick coffee, usually instant coffee, and rush off to college, backpack on her back, and headphones at full volume. During the journey, I liked watching people, anonymous faces passing by, each one immersed in their own thoughts, problems, routines. It was easy to get lost in this crowd. It was easy to believe that, among so many, no one could really notice you. His mornings were filled with theoretical classes and discussions about human behavior. In the afternoon, group work in the library, coffee breaks and messages exchanged between friends. At night, sometimes pizza, sometimes noodles, and lots of series on streaming. Weekends, meetings with friends in crowded bars, horror movie marathons, or just long conversations on the balcony about life, plans, loves, and fears. Laura was an ordinary girl with ordinary fears. Fear of not passing the tests, fear of disappointing parents, fear of never getting the internship of my dreams. But never, not in her worst nightmares, did she imagine having to deal with real fear, the one that haunts you when you think you're alone. She was exactly like billions of people, running against time, trying to be better, dreaming of making a difference, believing that bad things only happen in movies, in the news, with others. Not with her. It was this normality, this silent trust in the flow of life, that made everything even more cruel. Because evil, when it arrives, prefers to attack those who never expect it. Those who live with the door ajar, their cell phone in their hand, their mind too busy to notice the shadows moving in the periphery of their vision. What about you? Have you ever received something unexpected that left you suspicious? That mix of sensations of euphoria and a deep discomfort of alertness. Have you ever felt that shiver of unexplained intuition? Tell me in the comments. I really want to know, what if it's something so inexplicable that it could even become the next video? Laura didn't know on that ordinary morning that her life was about to change. I didn't know that, while she was laughing with Camilla about the difficult psychopathology exam, someone from the other side of the city was already watching her. I didn't know that the feeling of security I felt was an illusion, fragile like glass about to break. That Tuesday dawned like any other. Laura got up early, hurriedly drank her coffee, and left to face another day of exams and endless reading. The rain from the night before still left the ground wet, and the air carried a damp, earthy smell, mixed with the perfume of flowers in the campus garden. Everything seemed again routine. The invisible security of everyday life cradled her as always. Upon returning home in the late afternoon, tired and absorbed in her own thoughts, Laura noticed something different as soon as she stepped into the building's lobby. On the mail table, among forgotten bills and advertising leaflets, was a small golden box. The discreet shine of the paper caught attention even in the dim light of the hallway. She hesitated for a moment. There was no label, no sender, no indication of who had left it there. He looked around, instinctively searching for some clue, but the hallway was empty. The only sound was the muffled hum of the slowly ascending elevator. Laura approached the table. His fingers touched the golden paper, cold, slightly rough. The red ribbon that wrapped around the box was impeccably tied, as if each bow had been tied with almost ritualistic precision. Everything in that packaging seemed calculated to be beautiful, attractive. But there was something she couldn't name, a silent restlessness that refused to be ignored. With the box in his hands, he went up the stairs. Each step echoed in the hallway, like dull thuds against concrete. He arrived at the door of his apartment, and before entering, he took another look back. Nothing. Nobody. Inside the studio, Camilla was not there, probably still studying in the library. Laura dropped her backpack on the floor, took off her rain-soaked coat and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the box like someone staring at a mystery. Maybe it was an early birthday present, he thought, or a surprise organized by Camilla. Maybe a classmate, a secret admirer. His ideas tried to find a logical justification for that object, but deep down, the discomfort grew. Something felt off. He took a deep breath, pulled the end of the ribbon, and undid the bow with one quick movement. The paper slid to the floor in a sigh of silk, revealing a simple but solid cardboard box. He lifted the lid slowly. Inside rested a teddy bear, small, warm brown, with a red heart sewn onto the chest. Laura couldn't help but smile briefly. It looked like something out of a gift shop, one of those sweet and somewhat cliché gestures that make the heart beat lighter. But under the teddy bear, there was also a small card. A piece of white paper, cut by hand with whimsical letters written in blue pen, to the most amazing girl on campus, from a secret admirer. Laura read and reread those words. At first she laughed to herself, thinking about who the author of the message could be. But as she ran her fingers over the card, a strange feeling came over her. There was no signature. There were no inside jokes, clues, or any indication of intimacy. Just a generic phrase, which could have come from anyone or no one. The feeling of being watched, which had timidly visited her thoughts in recent weeks, now seemed more solid, more present. As if that gift had not been left by someone close, but by someone who preferred to remain hidden. Taking the teddy bear to the shelf above her bed, Laura arranged it next to her books and photos. She tried to push away the discomfort. She told herself that she was exaggerating, that it was just a romantic gesture from someone shy. But deep down she knew. Something deep down knew. The gold box, the red bow, the absence of a sender, the carefully neutral phrase. Nothing there was as innocent as it seemed. And from that moment on, the house that was once a shelter began slowly to become an invisible arena. An arena where Laura, without knowing it, had already been chosen as the main piece of the game. For Laura, that was just another ordinary day. For the predator hunting her, this was the first day of the game. And as she would soon discover, games like this never end well for those who don't know they're playing. At first, it was just a feeling, something so subtle that Laura wondered if it was real or just another consequence of stress. In the days after receiving the gift, she tried to convince herself that nothing had changed. I woke up, went to classes, laughed at the dull conversations in the university corridors, immersed myself in books, series, social media. It was the same routine as always, apparently. But there was something new, something that couldn't be seen, but felt. It all started at home. At night, when the world outside fell silent and all that remained was the sound of the wind against the windows, Laura noticed small noises that she didn't know where they were coming from. Cracks on the floor, creaks in the doors, the subtle hum of something electrical. Things that previously went unnoticed now seemed to whisper in the corners of the house. There were times when she swore she saw shadows moving in the reflection of the turned-off television. Other times I was sure I'd left the kitchen light off, but when I came back from the shower, I found it on. Small inconsistencies, minimal details, but they planted discomfort in every fold of your consciousness. On the way to college, discomfort accompanied her. Walking through the streets with headphones on and the whole world distracted in their own digital routines, Laura felt people looking at her. He didn't know where they came from, but he felt them burning the back of his neck. Every time he turned around, nothing, just people rushing around, absorbed in their cell phones, stores opening, cars honking in the distance. It was easier to pretend it was imagination. It was safer to think that way. But at home, the signs were impossible to ignore. One afternoon, while organizing her things, Laura noticed something strange. The teddy bear seemed to have changed position. Nothing too drastic. Maybe it was just slipping. But there was something about the tilt of the doll's head that gave him a chill. It was as if the harmless toy was watching her. He shook his head, laughed nervously, and went back to what he was doing. But the discomfort remained. On another night, alone in the apartment, Laura sat down to study. The silence was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic sound of the pen against the notebook and the distant ticking of the kitchen clock. That's when he heard it. A dry crack coming from the direction of the room. He frowned, stopped what he was doing, and waited, alert. Nothing. He started writing again. Another snap, stronger. Now fear crawled across his skin. With slow steps, he crossed the hallway to the living room. Everything seemed normal. The window closed, the lights off, the sofa in the same place. But again, something felt off. The air was different, heavy, as if the house breathed with her, as if there was an invisible presence, motionless, watching. That night, Laura slept poorly. I woke up every hour, sweaty with my heart racing. In his dreams, there were no obvious monsters. There were no desperate escapes. just the unbearable feeling of being watched. As if her movements, her thoughts were registered by hidden eyes, eyes that she could not see. During the day, I tried to rationalize. It's just stress, she told herself. It's exams, work, lack of sleep. But when night fell, certainty returned. She was not alone. It wasn't just anxiety, it was something real, something present. Something that had come into her life the moment she accepted that gift, that little teddy bear with its stitched smile, its innocent appearance, and its eyes that seemed to follow every step. It was as if the world around him had suffered a small, almost imperceptible fracture, an invisible crack through which fear little by little seeped into his life. And although Laura tried to ignore it, something inside her knew this was just the beginning. The beginning of something that she didn't yet have a name for, but that would soon consume every space of her reality. Lucas's world was grey. There was no laughter echoing off the walls of the house, no hugs waiting behind the door. Silence was his only faithful companion, filling every corner of the small apartment where he lived with his mother. A woman who, consumed by her own pain and addictions, rarely remembered that she had a child. Lucas learned early to be invisible. Mornings began with the strong smell of cigarettes and burnt coffee. The television was always on at high volume, trying to drown out the sound of screams that sometimes leaked from neighbors through half-open doors. Your breakfast? Pieces of stale bread, sometimes a packet of cheap biscuits forgotten on the sink. He watched the world through the window. He watched the other boys play in the playground below, kicking loose balls and pushing each other in wild races. But he never came down. He was never called. And deep down, Lucas didn't even want to anymore. I had discovered something more interesting: notice. From the corner of the window, he learned more about people than any conversation could teach. I saw the silent fights between couples, small thefts in backyards, the way mothers pulled their children tight when they thought no one was looking. Lucas understood. What people showed in public was a lie. What they really were could only be seen when they believed they were not being watched. And he loved watching. On cold nights, lying on a thin mattress that creaked with every movement, Lucas heard the sounds of the city, distant sirens, engines purring like invisible predators, footsteps rushing in the building's hallway. But it was the silence between the sounds that attracted him most, that space where he could hide without being noticed, where it could exist without having to explain its presence. It was in this silence that his mind began to shape itself. It was in this void that he began to build his own world, a place where he was the invisible master, the absolute observer. When he turned 9, Lucas did something for the first time. She followed a neighbor to the convenience store across the street. She didn't see him, never looked back. While she selected fries from the shelf, Lucas stood in the opposite aisle watching her every move, recording in his memory every trivial gesture, the way she bit her lower lip when choosing between 2 packages, the way she shook her leg impatiently. He felt powerful. There, in absolute anonymity, Lucas discovered a new type of pleasure. I didn't need to interact. I didn't need to be accepted. I didn't need to exist for others. Just watch. And it was like that, with silent steps and attentive eyes, that he began to collect lives, secrets, vulnerabilities. Lucas's childhood was not marked by love or protection. It was marked by the creation of a dark lens, a window through which he saw the world not as a place of opportunity, but as a huge stage, full of distracted actors, easy targets, and he was the only attentive spectator. Loneliness didn't break him. Loneliness shaped him. And deep within that childish soul, something began to germinate, something cold, something hungry, something that one day would come out of the window and into the real world. And no one, absolutely no one, would notice until it was too late. In the days that followed, Laura tried to ignore the growing discomfort. She tried to convince herself that the noises, the lights on, the sensations of being watched were just traps of a tired mind. Tried to move on, until Thursday night. Sitting in bed, with headphones in her ears and her laptop open on her lap, she watched some documentary to try to sleep. The room was in darkness, lit only by the flickering light of the screen. Outside, the wind was blowing, shaking the curtains. It was then that the cell phone vibrated, a discreet notification, a message, no contact identification. Laura hesitated for a moment, her heart beating a little faster, before picking up the device. "You look beautiful when you concentrate." The blood seemed to freeze in his veins. She looked around the room as if she could see something hidden there, but the surroundings seemed normal. Too normal. Her hands shook slightly as she reread the message. Each word seemed to pulse on the screen, mocking her, exposing the vulnerability she refused to admit. Tried to ignore it. Deleted the message. He took a deep breath. Minutes later, the cell phone vibrated again. "You don't need to be afraid. I'm here. I always have been." This time Laura dropped the phone as if it were too hot to hold. The feeling of being watched was now so thick that it could almost be touched. It was like being trapped inside a dome, where every movement was monitored by invisible eyes. She closed the curtains with a nervous tug, turned off the lights, locked the bedroom door. But none of that took away the presence. The fear was not in the dark streets. It wasn't outside. It was inside. If these stories give you chills and make you think twice about trusting strangers, leave a like. This helps spread these stories so more people can be aware. Laura knew at that moment that her life had changed. Because now it wasn't a sensation anymore. Now the danger had a voice, and he knew exactly where she was. The next morning, Laura could no longer pretend that it was just imagination. He sat with Camilla at the table in the small apartment, the coffee quickly cooling in the forgotten cups, and told her everything. Every sensation, every noise, every message. Camilla listened to her in silence, her eyes wide, her mouth half open in disbelief. When Laura finished, the silence between them was as heavy as lead. It was no longer possible to ignore it. Something real was happening. Camilla, more practical, suggested starting a small investigation on her own before involving the police. Laura agreed, even though part of her just wanted control back, even if it was an illusion. The first idea was to check the building's security cameras. They went down to the lobby and, with the excuse that they had lost an important package, asked the doorman to see the images. The recordings showed nothing useful. The camera in the B-block hallway had been broken for weeks. The others only showed indistinct figures, students coming and going, tired faces of those who were always rushing between deadlines and bills, no faces too familiar, no obvious strangers. In college, Laura began to observe her classmates differently. Every longer look, every more hesitant gesture, every untimely smile now seemed suspicious. Could it be someone from your class? A teacher? Someone she didn't even notice but knew her so well? Camilla suggested listing possible suspects: students who showed excessive interest, employees who could have access to the building, strangers who bumped into each other too much in the hallways. The two spent hours creating hypotheses, but it was like trying to hold smoke in your hands. The more they thought, the harder it was to trust someone. It was harder to trust your own instinct. Meanwhile, the cell phone messages continued, small, spaced out, but enough to keep the fear alive. "I like your hair up. You smile differently when you're nervous." Simple, banal phrases, but they demonstrated an intimacy that Laura never consented to. It was as if the stalker was always there, watching every little vulnerability, every involuntary gesture, and, most disturbingly, he seemed to feed on the fear he caused. Deep down, Laura knew that no matter how much they investigated, no matter how much they tried to guess who it was, the advantage would always be his. Because those who observe always have more power than those who are observed. And in that game, she was already many steps behind. Adolescence did not bring redemption for Lucas. While other kids discovered passions, built friendships, and dreamed of great futures, he delved deeper into his own silent world, a world where being invisible was an advantage, not a curse. At school, he was the boy with the low gaze and soft steps, the name that teachers forgot during roll call, the face that blended into the crowd without leaving a mark. But behind that dull facade, Lucas observed everything. He knew which students lied to their parents. He knew which teachers cheated on their wives. I knew who smoked behind the gym and who cried alone in the bathroom after exams. Observation was no longer just passive. It became a collection, a mental archive of human weaknesses. And one day, he decided to test how far he could go. He followed a classmate home after class. He didn't approach her. He didn't speak to her. He just stood on the other side of the street, watching as she opened the door, dropped her backpack on the couch, and disappeared into the house. The power he felt in that moment was intoxicating. She didn't know she was being watched. He didn't know that every simple movement, every careless gesture, was being recorded in his mind. From that day on, Lucas made it a habit. It didn't matter who it was, colleagues, neighbors, teachers. He chose a target, studied their schedules, followed them from afar, memorized their routines. He felt like an invisible god, knowing the little secrets that not even the owners knew they exposed, and the desire for control grew. At 16, Lucas was no longer content with just watching. He began to act in small doses, leaving doors open, moving objects around, turning off lights. Small disturbances, small tests. He wanted to see the panic arise. I wanted to see the doubt in the victim's eyes, the slowly emerging paranoia. Because for Lucas, breaking someone's security was more rewarding than any physical violence could be. It was absolute control of other people's minds. And as the world continued to spin, oblivious to his existence, Lucas smiled in the dark, certain that true strength was not in being seen, but in being feared, without ever being aware of his approach. The following days plunged Laura into an even more suffocating reality. What were once just sensations and messages began to take shape, physical evidence that could no longer be ignored. On Friday afternoon, when she went downstairs to pick up a package, she found something in the mailbox that made her freeze. A brown envelope with no return address, just her name written by hand in firm, careful letters. He looked around. The hallway was empty, but the silence felt charged, as if invisible eyes were peering at her from the shadows. With shaking hands, he opened the envelope right there in the cold light of the reception. Inside, there were several photographs. Photos of her. Some taken while walking around the university, books clutched to my chest. Others while having coffee at the small restaurant on the corner, laughing at something Camilla had said. And the most disturbing of her inside the house, through the window in intimate moments, combing her hair, studying on the sofa, sleeping. Laura almost dropped the envelope. Each image was an invasion. Each click, an invisible wound opened without her even knowing. He ran back to the apartment, locking the door in a hurry. He showed the photos to Camilla, who turned pale, unable to formulate an immediate reaction. As they tried to decide what to do, Laura found a small note slipped under the door. "You're even more beautiful up close. No signature, no clues." The threat was implicit between the lines. The message was clear. He wasn't just watching, he was getting closer and closer. That night, security completely disappeared. They put extra padlocks on the door, covered the windows with blankets, and slept with the light on. But the fear didn't go away, because it didn't matter how many locks they placed or how many barriers they erected. They knew deep down that if he wanted to get in, he would have already gotten in. It was the psychological control he wanted, and he owned it. The apartment, which had once been a joyful refuge, now felt like a prison, and every sound in the hallway, every blow of wind at the windows, was a cruel reminder. Laura was no longer alone. Never would be again. It was Camilla who noticed it first. As they tried to reorganize the apartment, in a desperate attempt to regain a sense of security, she stopped in front of the bookcase above Laura's bed. His eyes fixed on the small teddy bear, now crumpled between books and picture frames. Something was wrong. He approached, his heart racing for no apparent reason. He took the teddy bear in his hands, squeezed it lightly, and then he saw it. In the center of the red heart, sewn onto the toy's chest, there was a small black dot. Tiny, discreet, but for those who knew what to look for, unmistakable. A lens. Laura approached, feeling her stomach turn. The two looked at each other, unable to say a word. With trembling hands, Camilla ripped the teddy's stitching. The sound of the fabric tearing apart was like a muffled scream within the heavy silence of the house. Inside, they found a small electronic device, perfectly fitted between the foam. a camera, and not just any camera, a high-tech micro-camera with a built-in transmitter. He was watching, from day one. From the moment Laura accepted that golden gift, from the moment she pulled the red ribbon. Every conversation, every laugh, every lonely cry, it had all been captured. Everything had been seen. The ground seemed to disappear beneath his feet. The house was no longer a home, it was a stage, a transparent stained glass window beneath eyes that never blinked. And in that moment, Laura understood that the line between safety and terror wasn't made up of doors, walls, or windows. It was made of trust, and hers had been violated forever. When I saw that tiny lens hidden in the teddy bear's chest, I knew with brutal clarity that my life had completely spiraled out of my control. How could I be so naive, I thought, clutching the toy to my chest, as if it could suffocate the suffocating reality that surrounded me. Camilla was the one who immediately suggested calling the police. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to throw that camera in the trash, pretend nothing had happened, go back to the comfortable bubble of denial. But another part, the part that had already been violated to the core, knew there was no going back. We call. The police arrived an hour later. Two middle-aged men, closed faces, faces hardened by years of service. They seemed skeptical at first glance, as if they thought we were just two more hysterical young women. But when Camilla, with shaking hands, handed over the torn teddy bear and the shiny device inside, their gaze changed. "This is serious," I heard one of them mutter to his colleague as they examined the device with rubber gloves. We were interrogated separately. The questions were cold, direct, like daggers trying to find the flesh of fear. Who would have access to the building? Who knew your routine? Have you received any previous threats? I answered everything with a choked voice, trying to remember details, searching my memory like someone looking for something lost in a dark room. What if it's someone I see every day, I thought, and the idea was like a sharp blow to the chest. They took the teddy bear, the device, and promised a detailed examination. Before leaving, one of the police officers pulled me aside and said, in a low tone, "Change all passwords. Avoid walking alone. And most of all, stay alert. Sometimes they don't just want to watch." I nodded, trying to control my breathing, but deep down I knew this was just the surface of the terror. The real danger was still hidden, lurking, and he was in no hurry. The official investigation seemed to move slowly, stifled by bureaucracy and a lack of direct evidence. But when forensics finished analyzing the hidden camera, a new piece of the puzzle emerged. The device had a serial number engraved on a hidden part, a number that, after tracking, linked the equipment to an online supplier specializing in spying devices. And among the purchase records, a name appeared: Lucas Ribeiro, former student at the same university where Laura studied. Expelled 3 years earlier, involved in a series of incidents that at the time were hushed up and labeled as misunderstandings or bad jokes. But in the institution's internal archives, the truth was much darker. Lucas had been reported several times for persecution by colleagues. He left anonymous gifts, followed students to their homes, sent messages disguised as compliments. He had never physically attacked her, which made more severe actions difficult, but her constant presence created a silent terror. After his expulsion, he disappeared from formal records, changed his name on social media, changed cities a few times, but the pattern of behavior never changed. For the police, the connection with Laura became evident. He knew how to infiltrate without arousing suspicion. He knew how to turn an innocent gift into a tool of control. And most disturbing, he knew how to disappear when necessary. Lucas's last known address was a cheap boarding house a few kilometers from the university. But when the police got there, they found the room empty, abandoned in a hurry. The bed was unmade, belongings left behind, cheap clothes, notes scribbled in notebooks, surveillance diagrams. And in the corner of the room, nailed to the wall with a rusty tack, there was a single photograph. A grainy image taken from a distance. Laura, smiling, distracted in the central square of the campus, the predator's gaze crystallized through the lens. A cruel reminder that, for Lucas, Laura was never just any student. She was a project, a trophy, a target chosen with surgical precision, and he was still out there, waiting, observing, maybe closer than she could imagine. Lucas never became what was expected of him. He was never the brilliant student. He was never the model son. He was never the popular colleague. He grew up in the cracks of normality, between moldy walls, indifferent looks and words never spoken. Childhood taught him that being seen was dangerous. Adolescence showed him that observing was power. But it was adulthood that refined his instinct. Without a close family, without true ties, Lucas found a perverse freedom in solitude. While others sought recognition, he sought invisibility. He learned to use technology as an extension of his eyes. He learned that in the modern world, no one needed to break into people's lives, just watch. All you had to do was study patterns. It was enough to know the moments of carelessness. Fear, he discovered, is not born from a knife held to the throat. True fear is born from doubt, the feeling of being observed without evidence, from the discomfort of realizing that privacy is an illusion. He infiltrated where no one paid attention, at the open window on a hot afternoon, on the camera of a forgotten notebook on the table, in the predictable routine of someone who believed he was safe, and the cruelest of all, it's just that Lucas didn't look like a monster. He was banal, one face among many in the crowd. Someone you would pass on the street, who would hold the elevator door for you, who would smile politely at the grocery store checkout. And that's where the real terror lies, because real danger rarely screams. He whispers. He watches from afar, silent, patient, and when you finally realize it's already too late. Lucas never needed violence to destroy. He used oblivion, negligence, normality, and every person who crossed your path, every little oversight. It was just another piece in his silent collection. This is how a predator is formed, not through grandiose acts, but through the details that we insist on ignoring. And if I were you, I would start to wonder if you don't know someone like that, or even if you might be someone who has acted this way. Laura tried to convince herself that the distance, the change of routine, the police investigation would bring some peace. I tried to believe that the darkness was behind us, but fear, when it plants its roots, grows in silence. Over the next few nights, the apartment became a fortress. Curtains always closed, covered cameras, reinforced locks, planned movements. Still, she knew. I felt. In her deepest instinct, Laura knew she was still being watched. It was an ordinary Wednesday when everything collapsed once and for all. She studied in the living room, books open and papers spread across the table, trying to force her mind to focus. The yellow light from the lamp drew long shadows across the walls. The silence was almost absolute, except for the monotonous sound of the pen scratching the paper. And then, without any warning, a click, so low that it could have gone unnoticed. But Laura listened, froze. The sound seemed to have come from behind the bookshelf. With her heart hammering in her chest, she slowly stood up, each step feeling more difficult than the last. He approached the bookshelf, looked between the gaps in the books, and then he saw it. A small blue light, blinking. A new camera, hidden there, among old novels and forgotten notebooks. He was there, always has been. Every attempt to escape, every change of routine, every ridiculous precaution, everything had been useless. Laura fell to her knees, tears burning her face. There weren't enough locks. There was no safe distance. There was no way to beat something that was made of patience, obsession, and invisibility. The police were called again. They removed the camera, analyzed the apartment inch by inch. They found another lens, tiny, hidden in the bathroom's ventilation hole. Two invisible eyes watching, recording, witnessing every second of Laura's life. The feeling of being hunted turned into certainty. I'll never be safe, he thought, staring at the empty ceiling. The predator didn't just want to watch her. He wanted to own his freedom, your choices, your heir. And in some perverse way, he had already achieved it, because Laura was no longer in charge of her own life. She was a prisoner of eyes she would never see. And, worst of all, she knew that even when all the cameras were removed, even when the doors were locked, the real prison was inside her. The fear, invisible, indestructible, eternal. Time passed, but the fear remained. The cameras were removed. The apartment was searched, checked, certified as clean. They moved to a new location, safer, further away. Alarms installed, curtains changed, sensor lights in each room. But the feeling of security never came back. Laura walked differently now. Eyes always attentive, silent steps, controlled breathing. He learned to distrust every strange smile on the street, every long look in the college corridors, every new notification on his cell phone. Living became surviving. On the outside, he maintained appearances. He attended classes, laughed with friends, updated photos on social media. Inside, every gesture was heavy, every movement carefully calculated so as not to attract attention. She knew Lucas was never found. It was as if he had evaporated into thin air, carried away by his own talent for being invisible. No new leads, no new messages, but that's what made it even worse. Because true terror does not need a physical presence to exist, just a memory, just a shadow in the memory. The nights were the worst. Lying in bed, the light from the lamp casting shapeless shadows across the walls, Laura found herself imagining invisible eyes hidden in every crack in the house. The noise of the wind against the window, the light creaking of the floor, even the buzzing of the cell phone charging. Everything could be a sign, or not. And it was this doubt, this lack of certainty, that was corroding us from the inside out. If stories like this move you, if they make you question who really watches in the moments when you believe you are safe, subscribe to the channel. We still have many more dark cases to reveal. Laura learned the cruelest way that sometimes the worst prison has no bars. It is built within the mind, and the predator, the one who watched from the shadows, no longer needs to be present, because he became part of her, part of who she is, and it always will be. A year has passed. Laura changed cities, changed number. He even changed his haircut as if he could cut, along with the strands, the traces of fear embedded in his skin. He was trying to rebuild his life, new job, new friends, new routine, days carefully filled with obligations and commitments, everything to prevent the mind from wandering down dark paths. But fear, Laura knew, never goes away. It just changes shape. On the morning of her birthday, she received a call from the reception. "I have a delivery for you, Miss Laura." The heart accelerated, the breathing failed. For a moment, the temptation was to say no, to refuse without even looking. But something stronger, perhaps the need to face her ghosts, made her come down. The doorman smiled, distracted, and handed over the package. A small box, golden, with a red bow. Laura stood still, feeling the world around her go silent. The horns outside, the hurried footsteps, the sound of an elevator going up, everything disappeared, drowned out by the dull sound of his own heart pounding in his ears. He looked at the box. The hands were shaking. Every fiber in his body screamed to drop it on the ground and run, but she didn't move. His fingers, almost of their own accord, pulled the bow. The paper slid away, revealing another box, simple, pale. Inside it, a single note. No signature, no fancy words. Just one sentence written in a cold handwriting needs, "I've never been away." Laura closed the box, locked her eyes inside it. He looked around. People hurried past, common faces, banal conversations. But now she knew. The danger had no face. There was no appointment. It could be anyone, anywhere. And the question echoed again, like an old friend who never left. Who's watching you now? If you also believe that true terror is hidden in the most banal things, stay here on the channel. We still have many dark stories to reveal. Because sometimes the nightmare doesn't end when you wake up. Sometimes he's just getting started.